There are days when you don't want to move forward. Not because you're lazy, but because you're tired. Tired of waiting for results that never come. Tired of giving your best and still feeling stuck. Tired of watching others move ahead while you feel frozen in place. But the truth is, you're still moving, even if you don't see it. Every time you refuse to give up, even silently, even when no one notices, it's progress. Every time you stand back up after failure, every time you take a deep breath instead of lashing out, every time you keep a promise to yourself, you are living the Stoic way. Quiet, steady, and unshakably committed. This isn't a motivational video. This is a reminder that consistency matters more than emotion. That real strength isn't about feeling strong, it's about choosing not to stop. If you've ever struggled to stay on track, if you're in a season where no one claps for your effort, this video is for you. Share what keeps you going in the comments, or tell a moment when you almost quit but chose to rise instead. And if this message resonates with you, consider subscribing. Every week I'll be here, walking with you on the path to becoming mentally unbreakable. 1. Turn obstacles into the path that builds true strength. There's something quietly life-changing about the moment you stop seeing obstacles as problems and start seeing them as teachers. A friend of mine, after over a decade working in the same company, was let go with barely a thank you. He wasn't the networking type, had no backup plan, and wasn't particularly outspoken. But he had something better: stillness, space, and a skill he hadn't used in years: woodworking. At first, it was just tapping nails into scrap wood in his garage, building birdhouses and shelves for no one in particular. But each day, the rhythm of building gave him back something the layoff had stolen: momentum. Eventually, he began posting his work online. Orders trickled in, then doubled. 2 years later, he had more autonomy than he'd ever known, earning a steady income, setting his own hours, and creating value with his hands. What seemed like a brutal dead end turned out to be the beginning of something truer. This is the essence of Stoic thinking. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That wasn't just philosophy, it was a strategy. The Stoics understood that life would test you not to break you, but to shape you. They didn't expect life to be smooth. In fact, they trusted that the path worth walking would never be frictionless. They didn't curse resistance, they leaned into it. The very presence of difficulty meant there was something to be discovered there, about the world, but more importantly, about themselves. In Stoic resilience habits, obstacles aren't the reason to stop. They're the reason to retrain your mind, refocus your energy, and rebuild your rhythm. We've all faced moments that felt like unfair endings. Being passed over for a job we desperately wanted, hearing harsh criticism that stung more than it should have, losing someone who we thought would never leave. These aren't just emotional wounds, they're psychological friction points, and how we respond to them determines whether we break down or break through. The Stoic doesn't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "Where's the lesson? What strength is being invited from me right now?" There's a profound shift when we stop reacting emotionally and instead respond with a fall-forward mindset, where we learn not despite the pain, but through it. In everyday life, this shows up in subtle but powerful ways. You don't get that callback after an interview. What do? You pause, breathe, and refine your next step. You receive feedback that rattles your confidence. Do you hide from it or study it with clarity? When someone criticizes you publicly, do you respond with ego or remain centered, knowing their words say more about them than about you? These are the moments where character is forged, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet resolve to keep moving forward stoically, even when no one's watching. It's tempting to wish for an easier life, but the Stoics knew better. Wishing for ease is often a disguised wish to avoid growth. Because what really builds an unstoppable mindset isn't a smooth path, but the choice to walk steadily on uneven ground. The strength you seek is often buried inside the very thing you're trying to avoid. The job loss, the failure, the silence, the rejection. Not one of them is the end. They are the exact ground on which inner power is built. And when you stand on that ground, bruised but still moving, tired but still present, you realize something deep and quiet and liberating. The obstacle was never blocking your way. It was your way. 2. Take action without motivation to create real momentum. There's a quiet lie many of us believe without even noticing, that we need to feel ready before we begin. That motivation must show up first, like some unspoken permission slip from the universe. But the Stoics knew better. They understood that action isn't something you wait for, it's something you choose. Real progress doesn't come from bursts of energy or flashes of inspiration. It comes from motion. Even the smallest act done without excitement still carries the weight of commitment. Because momentum doesn't start with motivation. It starts with movement. I once lived next door to a woman named Linda. After losing her husband of 35 years, she spent months in silence, drifting through her days with no direction. One cold morning, I noticed her outside, sweeping leaves in her yard. The next morning, she did the same. She didn't look happy. She didn't look inspired, but she moved. And slowly, those small gestures led her somewhere. A few weeks later, she joined a local gardening club. A few months after that, she began helping others in the neighborhood design backyard flower beds. She didn't wait for motivation. She didn't plan a breakthrough. She just took one small step and let it lead her. That's how real change happens. The Stoic doesn't rely on the weather of their emotions. They understand that motivation is fleeting, unreliable, subject to mood swings and mental noise. So instead of chasing a feeling, they choose a principle. They act from alignment, not adrenaline. Discipline over motivation is their mantra. They don't need fireworks to start the day. They only need a reason and a system that doesn't ask for permission. They take action even when the heart isn't in it, because they know the act itself is the remedy. Movement breaks inertia. Doing begins the healing. What you avoid emotionally, you can still touch physically by moving toward it. You know this feeling. You wake up, and the idea of working out seems exhausting. The kitchen's a mess, but you don't want to clean it. Your inbox is full, but the thought of answering emails just drains you. And yet, the Stoic response is not to debate or delay. It's to do something. Anything. Fold one shirt, wipe one counter, type one sentence. No overthinking, no bargaining, just movement. Because every time you act without waiting for the mood to be right, you train your mind to obey your values, not your feelings. You are building the ability to move forward even when it's uncomfortable. And that, more than anything, creates momentum. This is the secret to how to build an unstoppable mindset. It's not about hype or hustle. It's about direction, applied steadily, repeatedly, and quietly. The power of steady action doesn't begin with clarity. It begins with the decision to begin without it. One honest step cuts through all the fog. And once you're in motion, even slightly, your thinking sharpens. The weight of avoidance lifts, and slowly you shift. You begin to remember who you are. You begin to realize you never really lost your way. You just stopped walking. The Stoics practiced daily habits not for perfection, but for grounding. Morning rituals, short walks, moments of silence, all anchors. These weren't checklists. They were in rhythm, a pulse that carried them through the storm. If you're stuck right now, don't wait for a surge of energy to rescue you. Choose to move, even in fatigue, even in doubt, even in silence. Because motion itself is a declaration. I am not ruled by how I feel. I am ruled by what I choose. And today I choose to begin. 3. Fully focus on the present to regain control of your life. Real strength isn't found in fixing the past or predicting the future. It lives in the only place we ever truly exist, in this moment. Yet, most people drift through their days as spectators of their own lives, caught in thought loops about what went wrong yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. The Stoics warned against this mental split. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." Not because the past doesn't matter or the future isn't real, but because neither is within your control. What you can control, what you can shape, what you can build from, is always now. I remember visiting my aunt not long after she retired. She had lived a fast-paced, structured life for decades, always juggling tasks, always preparing for what was next. But now, with the quiet of retirement settling in, she told me something unexpected. "I never used to pay attention while washing the dishes," she said. "Now I just let myself feel the warm water, hear the clinking of the plates. I don't rush through it. I just stay there, and I can breathe again." It wasn't profound, at least not outwardly, but in that stillness, in that full presence, She had found something most people miss in the noise of their routines. Peace that wasn't earned through escape, but reclaimed through attention. This is the foundation of emotional discipline that the Stoics lived by. When your mind jumps ahead or spirals backward, you lose more than just focus. You lose clarity. You surrender your power to something you cannot change or control. And in that surrender, you fracture your energy. The Stoic knows that being scattered is no different than being shaken. When your attention is pulled in 10 directions, your strength dilutes, your presence vanishes, and your reactions become reflexes rather than choices. Learning how to stay grounded in the present is not just spiritual fluff, it's strategic. It's how you reclaim your life inch by inch. Think of how often this happens. You're eating dinner, but you're mentally rewriting a conversation from earlier in the day. You're driving, but your mind is in a loop about next week's responsibilities. You're sitting with a loved one, but your focus is on the phone screen across the table. You're there, but you're not really there. That's the trap. And that's what the Stoic refuses to normalize. They train themselves to return to now, not because now is always comfortable, but because now is where you can act. It's where you make decisions, form character, and reset your direction. To come back to the present, you don't need a life overhaul. You just need a pattern interrupt. That can be a deep breath, a question asked with full attention, the sound of a clock ticking, or the breeze brushing your arm. These aren't distractions from life, they are doorways into it. The daily Stoic motivation doesn't ask you to achieve more. It asks you to notice more, to actually see what you're touching, to hear what someone is really saying, to be in the conversation instead of already reacting to what you think they'll say next. Reclaiming your life starts with reclaiming your attention. Not all at once, but gently, consistently. That's the path toward clarity and composure. That's how to stay grounded when overwhelmed. When you stop rushing through every moment, you stop running from yourself. And in that stillness, you find a power no one else can give you or take from you. You begin to lead your own mind instead of being led by it. Because the only place where change begins, where action matters, and where meaning is made, is here. In this breath, in this step, in this moment. 4. Train daily discipline to win back inner freedom. Freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want whenever you feel like it. It comes from doing what you choose, even when you don't feel like it. That's the kind of freedom the Stoics cultivated, and it's the kind most people overlook. Because it doesn't look glamorous, it looks quiet, ordinary, like showing up, like keeping a promise no one else hears, like saying no to the impulse and yes to the principle. That's what real discipline is, and that's why it's the foundation of a stable, self-led life. One of my younger cousins used to struggle with procrastination. He was working on his thesis, and every week he'd say he'd start tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. Days stretched into weeks. Excuses multiplied, and guilt settled in. Eventually, he made a simple deal with himself. Just 10 minutes a day. No perfection, no pressure. Just open the document and write anything for 10 minutes. At first, it didn't seem like much. But after 6 weeks, the thesis was done. Not because he was inspired, not because he found his flow, but because he trained the muscle of discipline in small, consistent doses. That's the kind of quiet power Stoicism teaches. You don't need to shout your effort. You don't need to advertise your growth. What matters is that you show up, even when no one else will ever know. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations for an audience. He wrote them as reminders to himself to live with integrity and constancy. That's the heart of emotional self-discipline. You keep your word, not to impress others, but to protect your own alignment. You do what you said you'd do, not because it's convenient, but because it's who you are. In modern life, discipline shows up in small moments. You promise yourself you won't check your phone before 9 a.m. But by 7:10, your thumb is already scrolling. You tell yourself you'll go to bed by 10, but Netflix loads another episode, and you don't resist. These aren't failures of capability. There are gaps in commitment, and they matter, not because the habits themselves are grand, but because every broken promise to yourself chips away at your inner authority. When you live reactively, constantly pulled by urges or interruptions, you don't feel free. You feel scattered. You feel distant from your own power. But when you practice discipline, Even in micro decisions, you begin to win back that control. You don't need to overhaul your life in a single day. You just need to start anchoring to a system that reflects your values. The reason this matters is not just for productivity, it's for identity. Every discipline choice is a vote for the person you say you want to be. Every time you follow through, even when it's uncomfortable, you're teaching your brain to trust your intentions. That trust becomes resilience. That consistency becomes your compass. That self-respect becomes your freedom. The Stoic doesn't chase ease. They chase alignment. They know that routines are not restrictions but tools. That rituals are not cages but clarity. They understand that how you wake, how you eat, how you respond, and how you wind down, these are not random actions. They're statements of direction. Each is a quiet affirmation that I am leading this life, not drifting through it. And in that leadership, there's peace. Not because life becomes simple, but because you become centered. So the next time your emotions pull you to delay, to indulge, to abandon the path, pause. Remind yourself that discipline is not punishment, it's protection. It's how you shield your time, your focus, and your energy from being wasted on things that don't serve you. It's how you build an unshakable mindset, not overnight, but one steady act at a time. You're not proving anything to the world. You're proving something to yourself, that you are the kind of person who follows through, no matter what. And in that choice, repeated daily, your freedom begins. 5. Learn to fall forward and turn failure into fuel. Failure is not the end. It's part of the path, often the most honest and most useful part. But only if you know how to fall forward. Too many people see setbacks as proof that they're not good enough, that they never should have tried in the first place. But the Stoic knows better. The Stoic understands that mistakes aren't verdicts, they're feedback. And feedback, no matter how painful, is information. It shows you where your foundation was weak, what you need to strengthen, and where your focus needs to sharpen. If you let it, failure can become a blueprint, not for shame, but for progress. A friend of mine once left his stable job in a corporate office to open a small cafe. It was his dream, something he had talked about for years. But 6 months in, the business collapsed. The rent was too high, his inventory planning was off, and his marketing efforts didn't stick. He lost almost all his savings. I remember the day he closed the doors. No bitterness, just silence. But 3 weeks later, he was working at another local cafe, sweeping floors, learning how their systems ran, asking questions without ego. 3 months passed. He launched a new version of the cafe, smaller, tighter, smarter. This time, it worked. He didn't just recover, he grew. And now he trains other new business owners on what not to do. His first failure didn't break him, it redirected him. That is the heart of a fall-forward mindset. The Stoics never claimed to be perfect. In fact, they expected things to go wrong. They trained for it. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, but because we do not dare, things are difficult." When failure comes, and it will, what matters is not the fall itself, but what you do the moment after. Do you drown in it? Do you attach your identity to it? Or do you take it apart, piece by piece, and find the wisdom buried inside? In modern life, failure doesn't always look dramatic. It's quiet. It's the job application that gets no reply. It's the third day of your new habit, and you quit again. It's the awkward silence after a risk that didn't pay off. But in those moments, you're being offered a choice. Not a punishment, but a test of direction. The Stoic doesn't aim to avoid discomfort. They aim to grow through it. If you break a promise to yourself, reflect, not to shame yourself, but to understand the pattern. If something collapses, don't waste time mourning what should have been. Ask what can still become. You aren't weak for falling. You only become weak when you stay down. Every fall leaves a trace, a message, a clue, a small invitation to rework your footing or your mindset. Sometimes failure means you were aiming too far, too fast. Other times, it simply reveals a blind spot you never saw. But it always gives you something if you're willing to look with honest eyes. That's the principle behind Stoic resilience habits. You don't chase perfection, you chase understanding. You fall, you study, you adjust, then you act again. No dramatics, no overthinking, just steady movement forward. So the next time you stumble, and you will, don't flinch. Don't let the voice in your head call it the end. Call it a forge. Let it harden your clarity, sharpen your identity, remind you that motion matters more than image. The world won't always see your progress, but it will feel your strength if you keep showing up. And every time you rise after a fall, even slightly bruised, you are declaring, I may have lost ground, but I have not lost direction. I will fall, but I will fall forward. Always. 6. Stay resilient. When emotions shake you to live by your core values. Emotions will rise. That's not weakness, that's being human. But strength is measured by how you respond when those emotions come crashing in. It's not about suppressing how you feel, it's about choosing not to be ruled by it. The Stoics never taught emotional coldness. What they taught was clarity, the kind of clarity that allows you to feel everything and still do what's right. Because values, not moods, are what shape a life worth living. I think of my cousin when I reflect on this. She's been caring for her aging mother who's battling a long-term illness. There are good days, but many more hard ones. Nights with no sleep, moments of total exhaustion, times when she feels invisible. She told me once that there are days when the frustration boils over, when she wants to scream or shut everyone out, but instead she walks 10 minutes around the block. Sometimes she writes in a notebook, not to fix anything, but just to breathe through it. Then she comes back calmer, quieter, still tired, but more in control. It's not that she doesn't feel rage or sadness, it's that she refuses to act on it. She puts her values, compassion, care, dignity, above her impulses. That's what Stoic emotional discipline is. It's not a denial of the storm. It's learning to stand in the center of it without letting it dictate your next move. The Stoic sees emotion like weather, real but passing, temporary, not true. And when it arrives, they pause and ask, does this deserve the wheel? If not, they don't follow. They feel, but they stay anchored. This isn't about numbness. It's about discernment. A calm mindset is not a natural gift. It's a trained skill. It's built in the exact moments when everything in you wants to react and you choose not to. You've probably been in one of those moments. You're in a conversation and something sets you off. Your heart rate spikes. Your mind floods with comebacks. You feel the need to win, to say what hurts, to leave a mark. But then something in you pulls back. A breath, a delay, 5 seconds of silence. You hold the line. And in that space, you save more than the moment. You protect the relationship and you preserve your own peace. That's not weakness. That's strength under control. That's mental stillness in the middle of chaos. Resilience isn't loud. It's not about pretending you're unaffected. It's about building the kind of emotional grounding that allows you to keep moving forward even when your inner world is shaking. That's the essence of Stoic resilience habits. To not be driven by fear, shame, or anger, but to acknowledge them, sit with them, and still choose the response aligned with who you want to become. The strength is in the pause. The power is in the response, not the reaction. This discipline shows up in everyday choices. You avoid gossip not because you don't have opinions, but because you value peace over momentary satisfaction. You walk away from arguments not because you're weak, but because you refuse to burn bridges out of pride. You stay focused on what matters, not because it's easy, but because you trained for it. And with each moment you remain aligned, you build confidence, not in how you feel, but in who you are. Being resilient doesn't mean you're never shaken. It means you don't let the shaking decide your next step. Emotions will rise and fall, but values can remain steady. And when you build your life on those values, you can move through any storm. Not because you're unfeeling, but because you're unshakable where it counts. That's real strength. That's inner control. And that's what keeps you grounded when everything else is trying to pull you off course. 7. Keep moving forward, because standing still is silent surrender. Staying still often feels harmless. You're not quitting, you're just waiting. You're not giving up, you're just taking your time. But under the surface, every delay has weight. Every pause without intention slowly becomes surrender. You don't always hear it happen. There's no announcement, no collapse. But day by day, the longer you stay still, the further you drift from the life you were meant to build. The Stoics saw this clearly. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A man must move, not stand still." Inaction isn't rest, it's retreat disguised as patience. I once mentored a student who put off returning to college for 2 full years. At first, he told himself he wasn't ready, that he needed to work more, to build confidence. to wait for the right time. But the longer he waited, the harder it became to start. Self-doubt crept in, then multiplied. The fear of failing became larger than the discomfort of doing nothing. Eventually, he decided to take one class. Just one. No pressure, no full schedule. That single step led to another, then another. His confidence didn't return before he acted. It returned because he acted. What changed wasn't the world around him. What changed was that he refused to keep standing still. This is what the Stoic understands. Life doesn't reward perfect timing, it rewards motion. Progress doesn't require certainty, it requires intention. When you stop moving forward, fear becomes the narrator. Every hesitation becomes a reason to avoid, every pause becomes a place to hide. And when fear leads, growth stops. The Stoic doesn't wait for the fog to lift, they step into it. Because they know that motion creates momentum. And even slow momentum is stronger than silent surrender. In daily life, this shows up more than we realize. You've been meaning to have that hard conversation, but keep putting it off. You want to change your habits, but the idea of starting over feels heavy. You avoid that one email, that one workout, that one decision, and suddenly standing still becomes a pattern. You feel stuck, not because you're incapable, but because you stopped choosing forward. And the longer you wait, the more comfortable the stillness becomes. Not peaceful, just familiar. And that familiarity becomes the trap. But movement doesn't require drama. You don't have to overhaul your life today. You only need to do the next small thing. One clear email, one healthy meal, one honest answer. That's how to overcome inertia with intention. Because every act, no matter how small, is a rejection of passive living. Every forward step is a quiet declaration: I am not done. I am not frozen. I am still building. The Stoics didn't wait for ideal conditions. They acted within what they had. They believed in the power of steady action, not rushed, not reckless, but deliberate. They understood that even a tiny pivot can shift the entire direction of a life. Refusing to stay stuck, even when unsure, is an act of resilience. You don't need full confidence to begin, you need courage. And you build it one motion at a time. So if you've been waiting, on clarity, on permission, on the right energy, consider this. Forward is not about speed, it's about intention. You're not falling behind, you're being invited to move, to test your legs, to push against the gravity of hesitation. Because standing still, though quiet, is not neutral. It's an erosion. It eats away at your momentum, your identity, your belief in who you can become. But one honest step forward, that changes everything. And when repeated, it rewrites your future. That's what the Stoic chooses daily. Not easy, not applause, but motion, quiet, steady, meaningful. Because forward isn't just a direction, it's a mindset. And choosing it, even imperfectly, is how you reclaim your life from the silence of surrender. The way forward isn't always clear, fast, or easy, but it is always possible. The Stoic path is not about perfection. It's about steady motion, the kind that's built through discipline, emotional grounding, and daily action. Whether you're facing setbacks, doubt, fatigue, or fear, you are still capable of choosing progress. Even when motivation fades, momentum can carry you if you've built it through consistency. Each moment is a decision. Stay stuck in stillness or take one honest step. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be forward. When you fall, fall forward. When emotions rise, hold your values. When comfort tempts you to stop, remember that stillness is not peace. It's quiet surrender. The Stoic understands that forward motion is not about speed. It's about direction, clarity, and the courage to continue even in uncertainty. You are not defined by what happens to you, but by how you respond and rebuild. Now I'd love to hear from you. What keeps you moving forward when things get heavy? Share your experience in the comments below. Let others learn from your journey. And if this message speaks to you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Your next step could inspire someone else to take theirs.